Okay, hey, I am back. This is Wanderlust, and this would be part two of my review of the Forrest Fenn interview at the Collected Works bookstore in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The date of this interview is 10/23 of 2013. This video was created or by Toby Youngus at A Gypsy's Kiss. So I'm going to give full credit where credit is due. Had part one, and this is part two. So I want to try and get through the rest of this as much as I can. I don't think there's much left in here. There's a couple of clips here and there. So let's listen in and see what else Forrest Fenn has to say here at the Collected Works bookstore in Santa Fe. Okay, let's listen to this clip here.
Honestly, are there clues in this new book that are not in the other one? There it is. Too Far to Walk, that are not in The Thrill of the Chase. Are there clues in this book?
There's one clue in this book that's not in The Thrill of the Chase, and I didn't know the clue was in this book until it was printed. But I gotta
Did
tell
you freak out when you realized?
Where's Charmaine all red? Charmaine, hold your hand up. We can't see you, Charmaine. Charmaine and I own the little one-horse land and cattle company. It has nothing to do with cows or horses or land, but it's a publishing company. And so Charmaine's been with Charmaine. I've known her for I think 41 years. I talked about it just in the book. But we have more fun. And if I don't have an answer to a question, I just make up one. Because the person that asks the question needs an answer. Yeah.
So I think that's really interesting about that a person has a question, I just make one up. And it is interesting that for the bulk of the rest of this interview, this is the part that I was talking about in the part one of the video, is he then proceeds to answer questions with kind of, I think, made up answers. So I think it is interesting that Forrest Fenn does this thing of telling you, hey, I'm going to make up made up answers, and then right to your face, and then in the next six or seven questions, seemingly makes up made up answers. And it's a little bit of a sleight of hand, and I think it's interpretive too. I mean, if you listen to the whole interview, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I think at this point in the interview, he definitely starts making up answers. I think it's interesting in this next little clip I'm going to play that he talks about Dale Neachel, and he lives on a little island in Washington State. And I think it's interesting that just before that he says, if a person asks a question, they need an answer, and so I'm going to make up an answer to fit their question, which is another one where I put like a little check mark and say, well, that's really interesting that Forrest Fenn would say something like that. So let's listen to this part here. This is worth thinking about.
I agree with you. What's the point?
I forgot.
Don't forget, he's just teasing
The
everyone.
clue that you didn't know was in the book until after the book was finished.
That's right.
The accidental clue.
That's
That's a good title.
I like that.
Like
You
that
should write a book about
The
that.
accidental
But
clue.
let me talk a minute about the cover. Those that have been on the blogs know who Dal Neitzel is. He lives on a little island up in Washington State. But about 4 or 5 days before we were going to the printer, we didn't have a cover. And so I called Dal on the phone. I said, Dal, go to the Madison River, where I put a little rubber life raft in the water and fished for 3 days down to Baker's Hole, and take a picture of your shadow in exactly that spot where I put the rubber life raft in the water. And he did that. The shadow wasn't on there. We had to fake that later. But I think that's interesting that this is a very spot on the Madison River. It's about 10 miles from Baker's Hole.
That's where the treasure
Are
is.
you impressed with that?
That's a great story. I love that story.
That's where the treasure is.
And I tell the story about river bathing is best in this book. And this green around the edges, Dal Neitzel took that photograph exactly in the spot where I used to bathe when I was a kid in the Fire River in Wyoming. So that adds a little intrinsic value.
That's good.
So there's a couple of weird things going on there, and I think it's exactly what I was saying, is that Forrest Fenn is doing exactly what he had just said a minute before, is he is making up an answer to fit the question. And I think that if anybody buys into the BS of that, and I think it's entirely feasible that they had 2 or 3 days or whatever he said before the book had to be published, so they had to come up with a cover, and he had somebody take a Dale Mitchell take a picture, and I mean the probability of Dale Mitchell just happened to pick up his whatever he was doing from Washington State and drive the 800 to 900, it's actually over 1,000 miles from the greater Seattle area all the way out to where the Madison River is, where he's talking about, just to stamp a picture of his shadow on the Madison River. I call BS on that. I wouldn't be surprised. More likely is the picture of the shadow is of Dale Mitchell standing on the beach along the Strait of Juan de Fuca at on his island, or and that's more probable. And Forrest Fenn kind of trips up in his own little story lie as he says something about, and we had to fake it or something. So, and that's what I think is probably bigger, more to the truth. And Forrest Fenn dumps the truth there in his own little thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if that is Dale Mitchell's shadow, but I think it's probably on the shore of the Strait of Juan de Fuca, which definitely makes you raise an eyebrow on some of my deeper dives on ideas about what this thrill of the chase is really about, and that it's much more difficult than you think it is for other reasons. Reasons that, well, a lot of people will reject if I tell you the reason, and I will tell you the reasons coming up here, and I already have hinted at some of those reasons why, and at some point I'm going to dump them further, but I've got more places to go before we start talking about those things. So I think this is interesting. After some going back and forth, Forrest Fenn makes this point here, and let's listen in what Forrest Fenn has to say.
I'll go. You better give her an A for tenacity. But she enjoys it, and there was a lady, a writer from Texas, called me on the phone and she said, Mr. Fenn, who's your audience for this book? I've told this story before. And I said, my audience is every redneck with a pickup truck and lost a job, has a wife and 12 kids and nothing to do. Throw your bedroll in the back of the truck and go look for the treasure and take your...
Which I think is very interesting because in the 2013 interview in April, he says a redneck and who's lost his job, he says, has nothing better to do. And he says 8 kids, and this time he says 12 kids.
kids with you. And I've had so many emails from people that have told me that that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, you've helped grow the...
Again, I think that's funny because he says, I have so many emails from people who's telling me what they're doing. So, but I think I'm sort of adding the two things together. But it is funny because his language talk sounds like he's saying there's so many people who have 8 to 12 kids who have nothing better to do or unemployed and grab their wife and kids, and they're rednecks from Texas, and they're driving up in the mountains in the Rockies looking for this gold treasure. So that's kind of a little bit of a weird disconnect there.
New Mexico economy. It's actually...
I like this little piece here. I just do. I find it to be something that most people would skip by. So here, check this out. Listen to this.
time here. Do you have any more you want to say, or shall we go to drink?
I'm sitting here taking notes on what you're saying. Just keep talking.
No, but I was interested, Forrest, when you told me that there have been, how many people have called you up and said, I found the treasure?
I have, the last time I counted, I had 35 different men have called me and said that they found a treasure and it's in their possession. So about half of them, I say, will you sell me that little bracelet back? And they say, well, what bracelet? And one time I asked this guy, I said, well, he said, I found it, I'm looking at it right now. And I said, well, can you tell me if the hot water ruined the patina on that beautiful bronze box? He said, thank you, and he hung up.
That is very interesting. 35 different men, and half of them have told me again, I don't know if that's his same point going back to the beginning of the interview where he says that he's going to provide an answer that fits the question. And wonder if that's just another example of that, where he's saying 35 men called me and half of them said that they found it. And the other part that I think maybe reading volumes into that is he's saying that if I put the thing in hot water, it would ruin the patina, it would ruin this chest. So again, what is going on there? You know, I think more and more is it Forrest Fenn, playing around with searchers and wetting their whistle and kind of pulling that string and making people paranoid. But he does make a good point. Is if you put a bronze box in a place where there's hot water, I mean, it could ruin the patina on the box. I'm not sure, but it is a fun thing that he pulls people along with. And I like the return on this. You got to listen to this. Is the return the joke that he makes afterwards about the hot water? Here, listen.
Now, and I said, well, can you tell me if the hot water ruined the patina on that beautiful bronze box? He said, thank you, and he hung up. He thought that was a clue. He was going to start going to all the places where there's hot water.
Well, we got Caliente, here we come.
And that is kind of funny that Forrest Fenn makes a joke about that this searcher is going to all go to all the places where there's hot water, and that was a clue. And Forrest Fenn's kind of slapping you around. Now, you could play on the other side of the coin and say, is that him a way of trying to lead people away from places where there's warm water? Take it for what it is. I think the last part of this that I want to talk about or just expose real quick is this part right here.
To do that on your own?
Or did Shiloh help you carry it to the Shiloh? Did Shiloh help carry it?
Well, as I've said before, that the treasure chest is heavy, and I made 2 trips to hide it where I wanted it to be. But I've told people, don't look for the treasure chest in a place where a 79 or 80-year-old guy can't take it. I mean, people tell me they're climbing up on top of the mountain.
Yeah.
When these guys are making a mistake, I don't want to interrupt them.
Right. Right. But you have narrowed the field of exploration.
That's very interesting that Forrest Fenn says people are looking for the chest on the top of a mountain, and I don't want to interrupt them while they're looking at the top of the mountain, which is kind of saying they're looking in the wrong place. So, I mean, that's about it for, this discussion at the bookstore. I think Forrest Fenn covers. Oops, I'm sorry, I may have had the speaker in the wrong way. I think that does it for this video. I think there's some interesting things about this video. I think one of the things I love about that video is he talks about that it could be at the top of the mountain, and he says, well, it's not at the top of the mountain, but it could be close to the top. Which I often think sometimes is that his way of basically saying, maybe in a way, if you're looking on a mountain, it's like way off. I think it's interesting that he hits pretty hard on the issue of, they were talking about the weight of it, and he says, if it's somewhere where a 70 or 80-year-old man can't go, that you shouldn't go there. So that definitely is really interesting because, in a multitude of ways having to do with vehicles. So what a great piece of interviewing information. And if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and we'll have some more content coming soon. So thank you very much. I appreciate anybody who likes my video. Thank you.